So we've been looking at this idea of spiritual paradox, that sometimes two seeming opposite things are equally true. And how do we live with that? I remember years ago I was in a class with Michael Beckwith, and he was talking about how part of your spiritual growth is when you can become comfortable in the midst of paradox, when you can embrace a larger vision of possibility. And so I find this quite fascinating, that we're always in a process of spiritual discovery and deepening and allowing ourselves to know ourselves. Aldous Huxley talked about this perennial philosophy that has been handed down through the ages, that comes back to an idea that there is a Godhead, a divine being, a something, and through that something, then it emerges that there are parts of the whole expressed into reality, and that then we are embodiments of that divine reality, and then we are living as a part trying to remember the whole. I don't think that's exactly what he said, but I know that's what he meant. Or something like that. Anyways, but right? So we're all on this journey, and so we're working through this process that we talk about all the time of both being human, having physical form, and being divine, which is to say we have consciousness. And so today I wanted to spend a little time looking at the very nature of consciousness and how we use it. Some of you may have heard, I don't know, you may not have heard, but maybe you've heard about a law of attraction. Anyone? Kind of heard about it. It was supposed to be a secret, but then they made a movie, and now kind of everybody knows, right? And so the law of attraction, which is another way of saying science of mind or whatever it is, that we have this capacity as beings to imagine an idea and have that idea be attracted to us in some form. And so understanding that the law of attraction is this process of saying that what we focus on becomes our experience. It's been brought to us in many ways. It was written in many ways in the Bhagavad Gita 2,500 years ago. This teaching of consciousness. The Buddha spoke of it. Jesus spoke of it. The Buddha said this. He said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world." Jesus said, very simply, as most of his teachings were very simple, "Seek and you will find." Now, some people believe that what he was saying, that is, if you seek this spiritual dimension, the kingdom of heaven, you will find that. But the truth is, no matter what you seek, you will find. And so we're always in a process of proving ourselves right. Ernest Holmes said, if we can change our thinking, we can change our experience. So this is not new thought, rather it's ancient wisdom. But what we are doing, I think, what's happening in our world is that in days of old, it was a more exclusive group that got to know spiritual truths, and then you had the version for the masses so they'd all behave. I mean, Lord knows what happens if you just let everybody be enlightened, right? Hard to run a fiefdom if, there's no fifis or whatever they call those. I don't know what they call those. I don't know what do they call those? I don't know. Somebody Google serfs. Thank you. I knew somebody. I've got my own little Google. I just throw out questions. People, it's good. So what we know today is that this idea, that this thing called consciousness is life itself. There is an intelligence, a wisdom, a Godhead, a being, whatever you want to call it, that is all-knowing, all-powerful, and that we are all some part of it. And so we are individualized points of consciousness. And then consciousness then expresses into form and expresses through these human bodies. And so what we know is through some mystical process, consciousness takes form, becomes human, evolves, is born, lives, and eventually dies. And one of the ways we know a person is dead is because there's no more consciousness, right? Whatever conscious that spirit part of them was has now moved to this next experience of being. So this is good. I'm working on my PhD in quantum physics, so I wanted to. Yeah, I really only have like 47 more years to go before. In other words, which is to say, I read an article, and so the PhD may be a little slow coming, but let me share with you what was in the article, because this is good. No, what I find fascinating is, Ernest Holmes said that science of mind is really just the compilation of the truths of wisdom, the truths of philosophy, and the truths of science all coming together. We used to call ourselves religious scientists, which is to say that we don't believe that there has to be a separation between science and religion, but rather they're all pointing to the whole. And so when we look for the commonality of all of this spiritual thought that has been handed down through us through the ages, we begin to understand a great reality. So now quantum physics is teaching us something different. You see, for a while, physics, some of us even learned Newtonian physics. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. Every action is equal opposite reaction. And there was kind of a mindset about what reality was. And it was sort of that you started with the smallest component, the building block, an atom, and then you got some of those together, and you got molecules, and you got some of those together, and you got cells, and you got those together, and you got, right? And everything built upon itself. So in the mechanical physics way of looking at it, this is a big machine that we're living in, right? But, nobody was happy with that. No, we got to keep studying. We got to keep thinking. And Einstein comes along and says, well, wait a minute. That ain't necessarily so. It seems like there is a theory of relativity, that everything is interrelated and everything is becoming this larger thing. And so this beautiful teaching of quantum physics has been emerging for some time. And it's really wonderful because what it says is, the Bhagavad Gita is right. Yeah. The Bible is right. All of these creation myths, although they're metaphorical, there's something to it. In fact, I love this line. Sir James Jeans, who was a pioneering physicist, said this. He said, the stream of knowledge is heading towards a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than a great machine. Like a great thought than a great machine. He says, mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather hail it as a creator and governor of the realm of matter. He goes on to say this, and this is why I like him. Get over it. And accept the inarguable conclusion. The universe is immaterial, mental, and spiritual. Yeehaw. So we get to be right. Yay. Right? So what quantum physics is teaching us is that it is all consciousness. What was the Buddha saying? That what we are, we think, and what we think arises out of our thoughts, and what our thoughts are creates our world. Ernest Holmes is saying the same thing. Over and over and over, we get this message that we are not somehow separate from the universe, but we are one with an integral whole, and that we are an individualized point of creation within that whole, using the one mind. That's cool. So, so some people will say, well, that's just your brain. Your brain is conscious. But I would say, no, your brain is something that functions and uses consciousness. Another wonderful physicist said this. Nassim Haramein, who said this, looking for consciousness in the brain is like looking in the radio for the announcer. The brain utilizes consciousness, but it does not create consciousness. So we are, my friends, points of creation. We are points of consciousness. Now, here's what's interesting about consciousness. What began to happen as quantum physics was evolving, there was this wanting to understand what is the nature of light. And there was two predominant theories. One, light is waves, right? And another said light is particles. So they devised these wonderful experiments to test, and what they discovered is it is both. And depending on what you are trying to observe is the result you will get. So the researchers that were observing, looking for light as particles, were able to find particles. And the ones working for waves found waves, dependent upon the observer, not the observed. And so another brilliant, see, aren't you impressed by all that I know all these physicists? You know, like I was having coffee with my physicist friends the other day, and so I'm reading the notes because I can make up all kinds of stuff here. So Eugene Wigner, who was a theoretical physicist and mathematician, received a Nobel Prize in physics in 1963. He says, "It was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum mechanics in a fully consistent way without reference to consciousness." You see, our old model, the old idea about science was that you put it in a test tube, you put it in a laboratory, and then you stood back as the impartial observer and observed what happened, and then you had good science. The problem is you can't separate because it's all one. And so by the very observation, we influenced the experiments. So these brilliant thinkers, now I'm not going to go into string theory today. Next Sunday, come back, I'll explain that whole thing to you as I do so well. But I wanted to spend some time on this today because you see, what we've been saying, what the mystics have taught us, is now being proven true through another level of awareness and understanding through quantum physics and quantum mechanics. But what it says is that nothing is separate from the parts. And so by our act of observation, we influence that which is observed. Now, if that is true, what that would imply is that our lives are a reflection of what we think. That, as Jesus said, if you will seek, you will find. And so here's the good news. Using the law of attraction, if we choose to focus on that which we want, we begin to attract that which we desire into our experience. With me? Agree? 99%, I'll take it. I'll take it. So here's the conversation. I just want you to know, today's lesson is only for me, because I need to have this conversation with myself. Now, if you want to listen in, it's fine, but just to be clear. So every once in a while, I have this conversation with the person that lives in my mirror and say, so if this is what you believe, then why does your life look this way? If you believe this is an abundant universe just overflowing with a greater good, what's going on with you? Right? Or my nose is running or something, I'm like, wait a minute. If I believe this stuff, then I should demonstrate perfectly all of the time. Right? Is that too much to ask? So what I discovered is that that the law of attraction has an evil cousin. And the evil cousin is called the law of distraction, which is as equally, if not more so, powerful as the law of attraction. Right? And so what happens with this, now maybe I'm alone, and so, but since I'm only talking to myself, it doesn't matter. But what the law of distraction says is that anytime you identify a goal and are activating the law of attraction, you may become subject to the law of distraction. And the law of distraction says anything that you wish to attract may be thwarted by your lack of focus, by moving your attention. And so those of you that know me, I'm very subject to the squirrel syndrome. What was that? Right? It's called ADD, but whatever. Right? So sometimes what we do is we say, by golly, I'm going to create the life I want. Enough of the theory, enough of the thing I'm practicing. I am going into the next level of my human divine potential. I'm going to express fully, completely, in every way possible. And therefore, I'm going to, whatever, fill in the blank. And then the law of distraction says, over here. And the kids misbehave or the whatever, and this changes, and we're like, well, I was going to do that, but then I got distracted. So what happens? What I've begun to look at is this idea that maybe there's some underlying causes that bring forth the law of distraction. The first and primary, I think, has to do with worth, self-worth. Do we value ourselves? Sometimes, and these are not conscious thoughts, they're very often very deeply held subconscious beliefs that say, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I don't deserve that great of a life. Maybe I can't really embody that. Now you say, well, that's just silly. Why would I think something like that? I don't know. But I've done it for 57 years, so I don't know why you'd be all that different, right? Little by little, I keep moving through this idea that I deserve to inherit the kingdom. And little voices sometimes say, well, what makes you think? Right? Little voices that say, well, don't be full of yourself. Which is kind of a funny thing to say when you think about it. Who am I supposed to be full of? I don't think I can help but be full of myself. It's me, right? I don't know. I don't know where we come up with these things. They make no sense to me. Right? So, again, as we continue to do our work, we continue to deepen, we continue to realize that the question is, if it's the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, what's the problem here? How willing are we to receive, to accept, to embrace, to embody? So worth has this underlying cause that sometimes says, oh, I'd like that, but really, me? The second one is sometimes there is a belief that there will be a negative impact on others if I embody this thing. I've shared many times this little child decision that I made, going through a time of difficulty and blaming in a full-hearted way my dad for all of the experiences that were going on. Now, here's the thing. It wasn't true, but does that matter? Right? Because once we form an opinion, really facts are kind of irrelevant. Have you noticed that? I always say that. Don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind. Why would I need any new information? Right? So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not true. I'm not blaming my dad anymore. What I'm realizing, though, is as a child, I made a decision that said, if that's what it takes to be successful, then I will never be successful. Lo and behold, which is fine if you're 8 years old. 28, not so great. Not so great. And I do these things that seemingly just happened, right? That came out of that subconsciously held belief that said, the little child that says, don't hurt your family by becoming successful. Now again, does it have to be logical? Heck no. Right? That's what's interesting as we do consciousness work, is sometimes these emotional decisions come and we go, Well, that makes absolutely no sense. Why would I live my life that way? I don't know, I just made up my mind, right? So some of us have that this feeling like if I really had a lot of money, everything might change. Then I'd have to question other people's motives. Or would it be okay for me to have a lot if others have very little? Blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is we make up. So at some level, our consciousness is creating. And so while at a conscious level we say, I want, I desire, I seek, I have, I know, I proclaim, I announce, some other part of us says, but not too much. Not too much, right? So we just keep working to go to a deeper level of understanding, to realize that everything in our life used properly becomes a blessing for everyone. It's an interesting phenomena that I witness in our world today, that everybody wants to be rich, but if you get too rich, all of a sudden you become this evil person, right? I'm not sure quite what the cutoff point is. I'm willing to find out, you know. You let me know if I pass that, right? You're okay at 99 million, but 100 billion all. I don't, what is it? I don't know. Because what we tend to do is we confuse the outer with the inner. We forget that it's all neutral. What we do with our money is just this neutral thing. What we do with it is what gives it its power. And that is so true with everything else. It is who we are that matters. So we continue to work. So the law of attraction has a few enemies. Focus, consistent action, and commitment. You see, if we want to the law of distraction has those as enemies. You see, the law of distraction works through lack of focus. We say, yes, I'm going to do this thing. As soon as I do this thing and that thing and the other thing. Or we say, someday I'm going to do this thing instead of moving into consistent action. Or we never make the commitment. And until we make the commitment to the desired result, it doesn't come into being. Right? We're waiting to get committed. I don't mean that in a mental sense. I mean, psycho-spiritual level is what I'm saying. Although... So thank you for letting me have my confession with you today. I'm feeling better already. I joke because in my ideal world, all I would do is be the world's best minister, have a book written, a whole thing going on around that, meeting with Oprah on a regular basis. Again, writing the book, running half marathons, and training horses. Before noon, when I really get going, and then, right? Is that so much to ask, right? It's an infinite universe. So focus becomes a piece of going, okay, so what's first? Maybe you can do all of that, but what's first? What's important? What's whatever? And so sometimes we forget to prioritize what is most important in our life. Sometimes I hear people say things like, if I had more time, I'd have a spiritual practice. That's an interesting idea, right? Again, not people in the room, I'm just saying, right? Because what we say is I'm a really spiritual person when I have time to be a really spiritual person. So when we learn to focus on what's most important, to do what we are committed to set that grand vision, to embrace that grand vision, to accept that grand vision, to live that grand vision, then we move with focus and with concentration and with consistent action into creating the good. You see, what I know is that change requires action. But the place within us that determines the outcome is that place that we come from. You see, it's not enough to just say, the thing I want is. It's what is my intention behind that? And I find that when we get clear on the intention, then we are now moving into a co-creative process. You see, what I want us to remember today and always, Jesus said to us, pray without ceasing. But again, what he meant to say is that you are always praying without ceasing, which is to say you are always in conscious communion with this presence. This is what quantum physics is teaching. We're all connected. So it would be lovely, would the universe only respond in those moments when you are in deep, contemplative, expansive prayer? Wouldn't that be lovely? I keep saying there's an invention for somebody. But we're actually in communion with the divine all of the time. So that admonition to keep elevating our thought, to keep doing our spiritual work, to be in spiritual practice is what makes perfection. So as I said, I do appreciate you listening in, letting me have this conversation with my mirror. Hopefully there's some little gem here for you today, but I got a lot out of it. It's an amazing and powerful thing, as I say. You know, I'm aware that we live in a time of tremendous change. And when we look around at the world, sometimes there appears to be so much negativity, which only reinforces for me why each of us has a responsibility to do the deeper work. That we are all part of a connection to the one mind. And we are all inputting into that one mind. So we need more people doing more consciousness work if we want to see a planet at peace and a world that works for all. So I want to honor and celebrate you for your willingness. I just want you to be aware, since you'd heard about the law of attraction, I felt it was only fair if I talked to you about the law of distraction. Because they're equally powerful. Choose wisely which you will use. Let's start now by going into prayer. I want to invite our practitioners to come forward. By the way, they are available to pray with you after the service if you would like. Aren't they lovely? So please join me as we move inward, honoring and acknowledging that indeed there is but one life, one power, one divine being. And that whatever name we give it, it is so much more than that. But we can agree that there is a ground of being that all things flow from. In the beginning, it was pure spirit, and then it took form. And so right now, I know that as we enter into this sacred realm, we are entering into the secret place of the Most High. We are opening our consciousness to unify with this divine intelligence, with this infinite wisdom, with this unconditional love. We open our hearts fully to be in the state of grace. We open our minds. We open the very portal of our soul and remember the truth of who we are. And because as we know that it, as Jesus said, that it is in this presence that we live and move and have our being. We know that we are connected with this universal mind and the laws of mind. And so we proclaim in this moment that the truth, the reality is one of wholeness. And we are allowing that wholeness to express and reveal itself as health, as well-being, as vitality, moving through every cell and every system of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual being. We allow ourselves to experience that we are one with the very source of all abundance, and therefore we must be abundant beings right here and right now. We know that we are living in a divine flow, and so we open ourselves to not only generously give, but to graciously receive of this divine bounty. We bear witness to the ever-present reality of love, absolute and unconditional, that self-givingness of spirit. As we embrace this in our own hearts, we are healed and transformed. We fully and freely forgive ourselves. We forgive others. We choose love. We choose peace. We choose harmony. We allow healing and wholeness to be revealed. I invite you that if indeed there is a burden on your heart this day, that we simply, in this sacred space that we have co-created, allow a new possibility to emerge. We accept our divinity. We accept our wholeness. We accept the truth of who we are. And in so doing, we realize that we are blessed beyond measure. We give great thanks for these many blessings. And as we give thanks for these blessings, we simply extend a blessing. We bless this spiritual community, knowing that it is indeed a divine idea unfolding, that it is spiritually guided and abundantly supplied in all of our work in bringing light to the world. We extend a blessing beyond this place to our brothers and sisters around the planet and across the globe. We're holding a high consciousness for a world that works for all, for a planet at peace, for a planet in harmony with itself. And as always, we bless all priests, all rabbis, all ministers, all teachers of every faith and every faith tradition. We know that there are many pathways to the divine, and therefore we honor and celebrate the conscious knowing of the divine in whatever form it comes. How good it is to stand in this awareness, to stand in this spiritual truth and reality, to give thanks for the many blessings in our lives, and to give thanks for a law that is operating upon the consciousness that we have established, that brings forth the highest good for all concerned, and always does so in perfect timing and in divine right order. For these blessings and so many more, I simply give thanks, allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.